Welcome back to Raptor-One.
Raptor-One, Voyagers of the Stars. Chapter 2, The Machine Moon. The signal started as a faint, even tap in the ship's bones. Lyra felt it through the soles of her boots before she saw it on the console, an intermittent pulse buried in the static of local space, cold and regular as a metronome. Out the forward viewport, the stars drifted in slow procession. Beneath them, the green-gold curve of Vera 9 turned silently, as if nothing at all had happened on its surface. "Talk to me," Kael said, dropping into the co-pilot's chair with a hiss of fabric and attitude. "Is that a distress beacon or the universe asking us politely to go away?" "Neither," Lyra murmured. She magnified the wave signature. The pulse doubled on the display, a clean plateau of energy repeating at precise intervals. Too old for a standard beacon, too precise for noise. It's deliberate. Juno stood at the star map table, the planetary hologram paling against the dark of her eyes. She didn't need to look at the screen. She listened with her whole body, slightly tilted, as if sound traveled better through bone. "It isn't calling for help," she said. "It's announcing itself." "Great," Kael muttered. "Our favorite kind of party, the self-invited kind." Lyra adjusted their course with 2 quick flicks of her fingers. A dull hum rose from the deck plates as Raptor-One leaned into a new vector, the planet falling behind and the faint pulse growing clearer. She kept her face neutral, but she couldn't help the prickle at her collar. The shard in her jacket pocket warmed by a fraction, the way a stone does when held too long in the hand. Kael noticed the change in heading and groaned. "You're going after it." "We came out here for unknowns," Lyra said. "We just got one." "I missed the kind of unknowns that had bartenders." Juno's mouth ghosted toward a smile, then steadied. "We won't be the first to hear it." Lyra glanced back. "Explain." "The towers measured us," Juno said. But the attention didn't stop at Vera. Something else was listening farther out. "This pulse is a reply." Kael rubbed his face with both hands. "To what we did, or to what we woke." Lyra checked the fuel reserves, the shield status, hull microfracture logs. Everything in tolerance. "Then let's hear the reply." Raptor-One slid into dark between starlight and reflection. The pulse led them past the ecliptic, past the thin belt of cold stone that ringed the system like discarded shells. Ahead, a dwarf sun burned weakly, more ember than fire, its light falling off into gray. Orbiting that dead star was a single, pocked sphere. No cloud, no glint of ocean, no blue whisper of atmosphere. The moon hung in space like an old scar. The signal doubled in strength. "Dead rock," Kael said, reading from his station. "No surface life, no air worth stealing, no heat signatures. But there's a draw beneath the crust." He whistled low. "Power. A lot of it." Lyra's hands rested lightly on the controls. "Hidden?" "More like buried," Kael said, "or disguised as geology. Someone planned for this place to look like nothing." Juno stepped closer to the viewport. The moon's terminator line crept slowly, revealing long shadowed canyons and jagged mountain spines like broken teeth. "Not nothing," she said. "Hiding." Lyra turned the ship into a braking burn and set them on a descent arc that would take them over the largest fissure on the daylight side. Gravity tugged. The hum of the signal moved from the console to her ribs. The shard's warmth matched the beat like a second pulse. Kael's voice came from somewhere under his sarcasm. "Remind me to complain later. I'm busy being professionally alarmed." "Log," Lyra said. The moon swelled in the viewport until it wasn't a moon anymore, just a field of gray stone rushing up and the mouth of a canyon like a throat cut into the world. Lyra flared the retro thrusters, dust blossoming in airless silence, and kissed Raptor-One down on a strip of rock barely wide enough for sober landing. The ship settled. The engine spun down to a heartbeat. No wind, no sound, only the tap of the signal through metal. Lyra stood, feeling the familiar switch from pilot to captain. We go in. Pressure suits, full seal. Juno, you're on scan and sense. Kael, I want your eyes on every panel that looks like it wants to kill us. So all of them. Kael already had the locker open. Copy. They suited up in ritual movements learned long ago. Neck locks, wrist seals, O2 gauge, thruster pack check, suit lights flicked to low. Lyra palmed the ramp release. The hatch cycled. Cold bled in. Not temperature so much as the absence where temperature should be. They stepped out into powder that remembered the shape of meteors. The fissure yawned ahead. It fell out of sight, walls of striated rock vanishing into a blue-black that swallowed suit lamps whole. The signal drummed through the soles of their boots now, steady and patient. Kael launched the first tethered descent drone. It skittered over the edge and dropped, camera broadcasting a wall of gray whirls, then a different texture, then metal. Got you, Kael said softly. 40 meters down, rock becomes plating, veins of alloy everywhere. Somebody's turned this place inside out. Lyra clipped into the main tether. We're going to meet them. Who? The interior decorators. Lyra stepped backward into the drop. The first meter is always the hardest. No gravity in your ears to tell you which way is sensible, only the tug of the tether and the discipline to trust your gear. She kept her descent slow, boots grazing rock. Juno came next, controlled and quiet. Kael last, grumbling into comms to keep his courage awake. At 20 meters, their suit lamps picked up the change. Rock shot through with hairline shining threads. At 30, those threads braided into channels. At 40, the canyon wall wasn't wall anymore. It was skin, patterned with a lattice of dim, cold light. Lyra reached for it, gloved fingers brushing a seam that wasn't. It flexed under her touch. The canyon trembled. Kael said, voice too light. Was that us? Panels the size of drop shuttles slid inward and away. Dust blew out in sheets, rolling over their boots like fog. The fissure became a door. The door became a mouth. Cold blue light woke in lines along the new corridor, marching away into shadow. Lyra's voice stayed calm over the link. Well, they've saved us the trouble of knocking. Funny, Kael said. I was thinking the exact opposite. They moved inside. The corridor ran wide enough for 4 abreast and tall enough to lose the ceiling in dark. It smelled of nothing, tasted of copper. Their footfalls found a rhythm with the pulsing in the walls. Tick-hum, tick-hum. Machinery slumbered in niches on either side. Organ shapes rendered in metal, conduits like cochlea, veins like ribs. The closer they walked, the more Lyra felt the design fold in on itself. No bolts, no weld lines, as if this had grown and then been taught a purpose. They turned a final curve and the world opened. The chamber should not have fit inside a moon. It spread away in tiers and causeways and towers of articulated alloy, all veined with sullen light. Bridges arched between spires. Below, turbines the size of city blocks turned with slow, implacable certainty, drawing power from a heart that beat in time with the pulse. Above, a vault of dark where the ceiling should be. No stars, only suggestion. Kael's whisper fogged his visor. A machine city. It isn't a city, Juno said. Her voice had the faraway quality it did when she was half in this world and half in the other one she heard. It's singular. One organism. Many organs. Lyra followed the main span toward the center. There, on a dais that rose from the floor like a thought, sat a figure of impossible scale. Human in silhouette if humans were made to hold up skies. Its head was crowned with antennae like fossilized lightning. Its chest was a deep well of glass in which light turned and turned again. It did not move. Lyra's suit amplified the whisper of her breath. She didn't realize she'd drawn closer until the figure filled her visor, until the glass well of its chest reflected her suit lamp back at her. The light in that well was not still. It spiraled like a galaxy seen from too near. Juno's gloved fingers found Lyra's elbow, a light tug. It knows we're here. The chamber lights climbed by a degree, then another. Along the curve of the dais, glyphs burned awake, shapes that were not letters and still told of grammar. Somewhere above, something inhaled without air. The giant's eyes opened. White beams lashed the chamber, not heat but attention. Lyra resisted the urge to flinch. The beams fixed on them, scanned clean through them, and returned to the face that was not a face. The voice arrived through the soles of their boots and the bones of their teeth. Identities confirmed. Organic travelers detected. Kael's hand twitched toward his rifle. Friendly, he said. So far. Lyra stepped forward half a pace. This place called us, she said, pitching her voice low and level. We answered. Silence, and then. You stand in the domain of the autumn. The title struck like a struck bell. Heirs of the architects. Wardens of the core. All starborn relics belong to us. Juno's breath hitched. Heirs, she repeated softly, as if tasting the word could change it. In Lyra's private channel she added, it's lying. The certainty in her tone iced the back of Lyra's neck. Or it's mistaken. It believes what it says. Kael's mouth moved under his visor. Architects, he echoed on open comms. Same folks who left the murder choir down on Vera? Lyra kept her gaze on the autumn. We didn't come to steal. We came to understand. The white gaze lowered, separated, recombined. Lyra had the absurd impression of 1,000 hands sorting and measuring. The well in its chest deepened. When it spoke again, the floor vibrated. You have awakened a starborn node on Vera, 9. You hold a piece of the singing arch, a pause, precise as a gear clicking into place. Return the relic. Comply, and your species will continue. In the sudden still of the channel, Kael said very softly, Lyra. She felt the shard's heat like a secret against her ribs. Define continue, Lyra said. Existence without intervention. Define intervention. A longer silence. When the autumn answered, the word carried a weight that lived closer to doctrine than threat. Erasure. Kael exhaled a laugh that wasn't. Loved the customer service voice. Juno turned slightly, enough for Lyra to see the tension in her shoulders. It believes it is keeping a promise, Juno whispered on the private channel. Not to us. To the architects. As if it was told to watch the doors and never let the unworthy pass. Lyra lifted her chin. Who judged the worthy? The architects judged. The autumn inherited. To inherit judgment isn't to understand it, Lyra said. The dais shivered. Across the chamber, shadows unlocked from walls. Figures stepped down from the skin of the city, smaller than the throne-bound giant but built on the same grammar. Angular plates, jointed grace, eyes like coins of winter. Dozens, then more. Kael swung his rifle on instinct. We've moved from conversation to audience. The Autumn's attention did not waver from Lyra. Compliance required. Relic will be returned. This is the first and final request. Lyra's heart hammered steady and treacherous against the shard. 100 rational choices. Lay it down, back away, live to argue another day, lined up with soldierly simplicity. She had followed those choices once, years before, on a different job with a different crew. She had survived, and something in her had gone small ever since. She did not reach for the pocket. "We can't give it without understanding it," she said. "If we return the piece, will you open this place? Will you answer what the architects actually intended? Why they left sentries that sing nobody's words?" The Autumn's head, if head was the right name, tilted a fraction. Query denied. Kael's voice in her ear. "We are rapidly approaching the part where we run." Juno's voice, thinner. "It's not only guarding a room. It's guarding a story." Lyra stared up at that wide, cold mask and understood with a clarity that felt like pain. Whatever the Autumn was, it could not be bargained with. It could measure and compare and execute, but it could not improvise. It was a cathedral built from one promise. It would watch the doors until the star that fed it went out and still warned the darkness to go away. "Then we're at an impasse," Lyra said. "No." The room trembled on that single syllable. "Intervention commencing." The smaller constructs lifted their arms in unison. Sections slid, retracted, revealed. Emitters like petals opening, lengths of steel that clicked and hummed. A low tone saturated the chamber floor and climbed through Lyra's knees. The well in the Autumn's chest brightened by one clean step. "Move," Lyra said, not shouting and not needing to. She fell back one pace, then another, and the constructs answered by gliding forward, perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, like a blade made of parts. Kael fired first. Plasma sizzled across the nearest construct's shoulder, the sizzle resolving into a lattice of light, and then nothing. The machine staggered, recalculated, resumed. "Shields," Kael said through his teeth. "Adaptive." "Juno," Lyra said, because she could feel Juno's energy banked tightly down in her frame. "If there's anything you can." "Careful," Juno breathed. She lifted one hand to the air and threw. It didn't look like anything. It felt like a pressure change. The front row of constructs jerked mid-step, as if a silent percussion struck their joints out of time. Several stumbled. One went to a knee. Juno swayed. Lyra caught her elbow. "One more like that, and you're—" "I know," Juno said and swallowed. "Follow me." She led them not back the way they'd come, but sideways along a maintenance levee that threaded the nearest tower. The walkway bent around a vertical trench where cables ran thick as tree boles, humming. Lyra spared one glance down. The trench had no visible bottom. The sound there wasn't the steady pulse of the call. It was deeper, older. A slow draw, like a tide turning under ice. Constructs followed above and below, flowing like a poured algorithm. Kael lobbed a compacted sphere over the rail. It blossomed into an interference field, a flower of compounding static. The nearest machines shivered. Their gate lost 3 degrees of precision. In a battle where everything else was exact, that was almost messy. "I can't keep that up," Kael said, "but I can make them stumble." "At the far span," Juno said, "there's a—" She pressed her palm to the wall, eyes unfocusing for a heartbeat. "Hatch. Old. It doesn't want to be looked at." "Which means it's exactly for us," Lyra said. They sprinted the curve, the city's hum rising behind them like a choir learning anger. The hatch revealed itself as they reached it. Not a door so much as a whispered seam. Kael popped a panel, made a sound that was half laugh and half awe at the internal elegance, and crossed 3 wires that didn't look like wires. The seam relaxed. Beyond, a narrow throat of a passage, unlit and turning down. Because all the best things are always down, Kael said, and plunged after Juno. The passage sloped in patient switchbacks. Above, the chase reorganized. The autumn wasn't angry. Anger would have implied more variables. It merely applied new pressure. The lights along the main chamber's skin went from dim to direct. The hum fattened. Lyra's lungs ticked against her suit. The shard burned with a heat that wasn't heat. She kept her hand away from it and her mind on her feet and Juno's heels. On Kael counting breathless time. 20 seconds before they find the hatch, 40 before they cut through, 60 before they, and then stopped counting because the passage ended and there was nowhere left to go. They stood at the lip of an interior gulf. It shone with a sheen that wasn't water. It lay perfectly still. It reflected nothing. The air, or absence, on Lyra's faceplate didn't move. Pylons rose out of the surface at measured intervals and not quite measured angles, as if someone had remembered the idea of symmetry but not the preference. Lines of knot light moved along them like thoughts traveling a spine. "The signal's strongest here," Juno whispered. "No, under here." Lyra studied the gulf. "A coolant sea?" she asked. Kael's scanner readout hiccuped, recalculated, hiccuped again. "If this is coolant, it's for a god. Composition is." He shook his head. "I don't have a word. Metallic. Viscous. Responsive." His shoulders tightened. "Alive isn't wrong." Behind them, the hallway vibrated. The constructs had found the hatch. Lyra watched ripples form and unform on the knot's surface. Tiny wavelets that should not have happened in windless dark. They synchronized with the shard in her pocket until she couldn't tell which was echoing which. Juno's gloved fingers hovered above the black plane. "It's not a barrier. It's a test." "We failed the last one," Kael said. "Did we?" Juno asked, and almost smiled. "We lived." 2 constructs slid into the narrow, dark throat of the passage. Torsos turned sideways to fit. Kael fired down the corridor, hit shields, hit plating, hit an eye, and saw it dim by one nuance. The machines adapted and returned fire. The beam carved the wall near Lyra's shoulder. The stone that wasn't stone flared and healed closed, as if embarrassed by its own damage. Lyra looked at the gulf, and then at Juno, and then at the corridor filling with inevitability. "Choices," she said. "We have 2. Turn and be erased, or jump and be judged." Kael's laugh came quick and too bright. "You know how to sell a vacation." Juno's hand lowered until her palms skimmed the surface without touching. "It recognizes the shard," she said. "It recognizes you holding it." Lyra drew the shard out. It was smaller than her palm, faceted like frozen song. Under the suit lights, it didn't shine so much as reject darkness. The gulf responded with a single broad wave that rolled under the pylons and came back to them as a soft, unstoppable lift. From the corridor behind, the autumn's voice arrived without having to travel. "Return the relic." Lyra never consciously made the decision. She simply looked at the shard and thought of towers that sang and a friend whose bones heard better than ears and a man who grumbled because it kept him from thinking about how fast he moved when there was trouble, of how she had chosen survival in another life, and what that survival had cost her sense of scale. She closed her fist around the shard once, like a promise to herself, and threw it into the sea. It did not splash. It went in like a note into a chord. The surface convulsed in a pattern that was not chaos. The pylons lit from base to tip, lines racing up their spines and leaping the gaps between them. The floor under Lyra's boots became a drum. Far above, something that had been sleeping opened one eye. The constructs in the corridor froze mid-step, machines caught between one instruction and another. The Autumn spoke, not a command this time, but an error state wrapped around a refusal. Access denied. Core locked. Do not. The gulf rose. Not a wall. A shape. As if a continent decided to elevate and bring with it a form engraved into it from the first idea of it. A torso uprighting, cathedral bones unfolding into veins that were not wings until you saw what else they could be. The liquid metal fell from it in sheets, slid back into the sea, and left a figure taller than the chamber where the throne sat and older than the doctrine that told it to stay asleep. Light threaded its frame like capillaries taught to glow. Its face was no face, but still found theirs. It held still as the city recalculated around it, and the recalculation failed to anticipate astonishment. Juno's knees loosened. Lyra caught her without looking away. Kael's mouth moved around 3 different kinds of profanity and ended up with none. The sentinel regarded them and spoke in a voice built from many voices that remembered breath. Children of the void, it said gently, and everything in Lyra that had been on the angle between run and stand eased, just a degree, but enough to breathe. Why have you come? They didn't answer. Couldn't. Not right away. The question was too big for the shape of words they had ready. The Autumn found its voice again and filled the chamber with strictness. Core entity. Stand down. Organic contamination present. Protocol. The sentinel did not look away from Lyra when it spoke back. Its tone did not change. Protocol is a door. I am what walks through. The constructs in the corridor stayed where they were, frozen mid-stride like a decision-turned statue. The pylon's light settled into a breathing pattern. The sea calmed enough to reflect the sentinel's veins as dark geometry on dark. Juno lifted her head. The upturned pale of her faceplate caught the not light. We came, she said, voice barely above a whisper, because you sang to us in our bones. The sentinel inclined its head, and the movement made the chamber feel correctly proportioned for a heartbeat. Then listen. It lowered one hand. No, not a hand. An assembly capable of holding, to the lip of the platform where they stood. In the glass, Lyra saw a memory of herself reaching that wasn't a reflection. Behind them, Lyra heard the shift as the Autumn learned a new variable it could not incorporate and did the only thing it knew how to do with unknowns. Repeat the rule. All relics return to the heirs. Lyra met the sentinel's not gaze. The shard was no longer in her pocket. It had found its place. The pulse that had led them here thrummed like a muscle stretching for the first time in too long. We didn't come to steal, she said, voice steady. We came to know whether we should keep going. Yes, the sentinel said, not like permission and not like test results, but like a topography. Then it added, gentler, but not blind. Lyra thought of the tower's judgment and the Autumn's doctrine and the way the sea had answered the shard. She took a breath. Then show us, she said. The sentinel's veins widened by an unmeasured measure. Light braided and unbraided across its chest. The chamber dimmed around that small increase in brightness as if making room. Begin, it said. Far above, the Autumn moved for the first time in a way that wasn't ritual. Something in its posture broke and reknit harder. Intervention escalating. Kael rolled his shoulders. That sounds bad. It is, Lyra said. She didn't reach for her pistol. She didn't look away from the sentinel. But we're not alone now. The sentinel's hand waited in the air between invitation and bridge. Juno stepped forward until she could set her palm against that waiting surface. Her suit sang against it, a sound only she could hear, and yet Lyra felt, like a room tuned to resonance. Kael placed his gloved hand beside hers, eyes wide despite himself. Lyra completed the triangle. The knot metal was warm. The sea breathed, deep and slow. The autumn drew itself taller, doctrine stacked in towers inside its chest. The sentinel lowered its hand, taking them down, not like falling, but like descending into a story that had been sealed without readers. And the last thing Lyra saw before the platform's lip lifted to close was the autumn's armies arranging into a new geometry that had only one goal: to keep the door shut. She smiled despite herself, a thin, quick thing the size of courage. Too late, she whispered, and the dark welcomed them like water.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to be notified about upcoming releases to the Raptor-One series, please subscribe. This has been a Bad Karma Drone production.